getting a chance to practice at home, I'm in my cozy chair. I got my keyboard, I got my mouse, I got my water, my cup of coffee. I'm in my environment. And so I found it's just a little bit easier for some things, not for everything. It's obviously there's positives and negatives. So I wondered if you have, little sidebar, observe something similar.
I have, and actually it concerns me because I believe one of the key reasons people don't practice is it doesn't occur to them that you need to practice because of the myth of experience. But the other is because practice that works is uncomfortable. And so when I hear, there's a way that makes practice a little easier, I ask myself, is it making it easier because it's degrading the quality of the practice? Or is it making it easier because it's improving the outcome of the practice? I'm for the latter. I'm worried about the former because I see a lot of this, especially in sales coaching in a corporate environment. In many sales trainings, even when they're done well, and even when people love the experience, at best, I say, Colin, here's a new approach to asking questions. Try it out. You try it once. Maybe you get feedback, maybe even from a peer, which might not be the best feedback, but you get it. And then that's it. It's very seldom a chance for you to integrate that feedback and demonstrate you've heard it and applied it. That's where you're taking a bit of a vulnerable risk. So one of the things I'll say is if your practice isn't feeling uncomfortable, and if the feedback that you're getting isn't often what I describe as stingy, like, I didn't want to hear that. I know I need to, but I didn't like hearing it.
Mhm.
I would urge you to turn the volume up a little, because I would say that until it gets so uncomfortable that it collapses you, the more uncomfortable, the more rapid the growth.
It is funny. You kind of had that feedback face of like, there is a minimum effective dose of feedback in order for it to be,
That,
make you make this face. That's when change is going to occur. When the person goes, oh, yeah, oh, I hate listening to that part. I know what I did.
yeah. I describe it as the difference between saying, Colin, you've got a beautiful smile, which you like to hear, and you've got spinach in your teeth, which you don't want to hear, especially late in a podcast. You don't, but you need to hear it. That's the difference between kind feedback and truthful but effective feedback.
Mhm. So if I'm a leader, whether remote or in office, how do I build this culture of feedback? Because if I'm a sales manager, sales development manager, and I have 8 direct reports, I mean, if I'm going to do an hour of coaching with them, you say I should be doing coaching with them every day. So now that's 8 hours a day. If I'm a sales manager, I've got other things to do. So
Mm.
I'm curious here, what's your take here on what is that balance and what does it look like?
Well, firstly, I wouldn't put the onus of all my practice as a sales rep on my manager.
Mm.
I do think that a manager should be structuring practice sessions and having a one-on-one, probably no more than once a week, as part of the one-on-one, the deal review and the checking in on how the person is doing. There should be a piece of practice in there. That doesn't mean that that's the sum total of practice. I think that sellers should be pairing up with an accountability buddy, as I call them. So you and I agree, we're going to work on our listening skills this week, and maybe we have a joint manager who will, give us some of his or her expert feedback at the end of this week, presuming that they are better at the skill than we are.
Mhm.
So as a manager, I would say the number one way to create a culture of feedback is not to walk into someone's office and say, hey, Colin, mind if I give you a little feedback? Because no one wants that ambush feedback.
Mhm.
Instead, I would do two things. One, I would ask my sellers to take responsibility for designing their own feedback alliance. An alliance is me as the seller comes to you, Colin, my manager, and says, Colin, what I'm working on is my origin story when I introduce myself to new people. The outcome I'm going for is that people trust me in minutes. And the specific action I'm going to take is sharing a story about myself when I introduce myself rather than a resume summary, which just confirms I'm a salesperson versus a story which might reveal my humanity and offer a bridge to trust. So when sellers are driving their own performance improving and are making the request for feedback, it's not an ambush. It's more welcome. It's more likely to be absorbed and put into practice. And in the end, feedback that isn't put into practice is not a practice culture. It's a micromanaging culture. And then the second thing I'll say to managers is lead by example. Rather than listening to your great podcast and saying, you know what, I need to double down on the amount of feedback I give. I say to managers often, go spend a month doing nothing but asking your sellers for feedback on your performance as a manager. Teach them a feedback framework. I like using the 2x2 model that we use at the Kellogg Sales Institute and at Habits at Work, but you can use any psychologically sound feedback model and do it for a month. And after a couple of weeks, I've found many sellers go to managers and say, this is, you're asking for feedback. I can see you using it. Can I have a little bit from you? Because it becomes clear that this is something that drives growth, that's valuable to the manager, and then we want some of it for ourselves.
This is such a key point to start on, or to start with. If you are, I think as a new manager, even as a rep yourself, it's so easy to develop a culture of where feedback isn't the norm, where you're not because you don't want to, but it's just not a regular thing. And so the only time feedback comes up is when it's really negative, of like, you really screwed this thing up. And what I found was like, it was really hard to get up over the hump, that initial hump of, going from no feedback, no regular feedback conversation to a regular feedback conversation. And now that I've established that with the people I do one-on-ones with, it's normal. And they share feedback with me. And there's this like feeling of safety that they feel comfortable sharing with me, and they feel comfortable receiving feedback from me. I'd love if you could share a little bit about, you kind of mentioned some strategies to get there, but if somebody's listening to this and they're saying, I want to do this with my reps, but I just don't feel like I can get there, or I'm experienced enough, or I don't feel like I'm, good enough, or I don't have that relationship. What's some advice you would have for somebody who's in that position?
Yeah. The first thing I'll say is that having people show up for any practice is a whole lot better than nothing. So whether you feel capable as a coach in your new manager role, whether you think you've got a model of excellence or not, the greatest gift you can give to one of your sales team is simply as a discipline partner to say, practice your pitch on me before you go and practice on your prospect. Because wouldn't you rather have your worst day be in the office over a Zoom with your manager than out there blowing a deal that could be worth millions of dollars to you and hundreds of thousands of dollars in commissions potentially? So that's the first thing I'd say. The second I would say is to be clear that we are leveling up together. I may not be a great coach yet because I've been an individual contributor for years. I got promoted, wonderful, but being great at selling doesn't make you a great coach yet. It helps, but being able to do something is different from knowing how. So that distinction between knowledge and skills is one, but the difference from knowing how and being able to coach others on something is also a different skill. And it takes time to build. How do you do it? By practicing to be a coach. So that's why I say it would be great for new managers to start with the mindset. Let me be clear. First time as a manager, the fastest way to get good at as a manager is to ask for feedback from my team on how I'm doing, including perhaps, and this is a little meta, how I'm doing as a feedback coach to them. Few other things to consider. If coaching isn't in your calendar, it's not going to happen. Even if it is, the chances are it'll get sort of replaced with something urgent because it feels like it's not urgent, and it isn't. But it's critically important because the greater the quality of your coaching, the more capable your sales team becomes without them needing to lean on you to close deals or guide their actions. So it is one of those upfront investments that pays off. And that brings me to my last point, which is wanting to do something almost never gets the job done. Here's a new manager who wants to be a great coach. It's like losing weight. We all want to lose a little couple of pounds, or we all want to be fitter. And my question always, how's that working out for you? Because mere desire is seldom the recipe for sustained action. Because we run out of willpower and life gets in the way. So whatever you can do to remove motivation as the driver for this happening is a path to success. In other words, putting it in your calendar, having an accountability buddy that keeps you doing the practice, maybe making a commitment to your boss as a manager that you will show her every 2 weeks the transcripts of the one-on-one, something that calls you to account as a manager.